Good afternoon. Happy Sunday, everybody. We're going to try this again because it looked like our last attempt at today's episode froze up. So we're going to record this again. Welcome back to the Insurance Pilot, where we try to make you an expert insurance consumer in about 5 minutes a week. And what I'm going to give you today is some hints as to how you can understand your insurance policy better without reading so much you cross your eyes. I'm going to give you sort of the cliff notes and show you how you can get out good policy information without having to read all 60 or 70 pages of what can be a very daunting document. The very first thing, what I want to tell you is you're going to have really 4 things to focus on. The first part that I want you to look at, if you're not going to read your entire policy, which again, I always advise, if you've read if you've seen any of our Eating the Elephant series, you know I always advise that you read the language. But again, I know it can be very intimidating, and if it's too intimidating and it's going to scare you off, at least take my advice today and look at the parts that we want to talk about in the next couple of minutes. The first part I want you to look at is your declarations page. Now this is probably 3 or 4 pages in because you'll have cover pages and things like that when you get your policy packet, but look for the declarations page, or dec page is sometimes what we call it. This is what has your name and address. It has the various coverages. It has a bunch of numbers on it showing your dwelling coverage, your contents, things like that. It may have your lender's name, things such as this. It'll also have a list of endorsements and a bunch of other rating information that may not be important, but it's going to be either 1 or 2 pages typically. And what you need to do there is a couple of things. Number one, look at the numbers on it to make sure that they make sense. If you have a $300,000 home, but your coverage A dwelling amount is $160,000, obviously that's something you're going to want to address with your agent or other insurance provider. This is not a really hard document really to understand, and on a lot of them, typically, they will have a list of endorsements with some sometimes fairly nebulous names. They have really bizarre looking form numbers on them that won't tell you anything, but they'll have a brief description of those endorsements as well. And so if something on there you find puzzling or troubling, something that maybe shows a limitation on a type of coverage, or it shows a special sublimit on something, then what you need to do is you need to circle that on your declarations page and discuss it with your agent as soon as you can. The second thing I want you to pay attention to in your policy packet, and this is the most important, if you're going to read no other part of your policy, read this part. It is the easiest to understand. It is the most clear. It is in plain English because that is dictated by the Office of Insurance Regulation in Florida. Every personal lines policy, meaning your homeowner's policy, for instance, has to have this part of the document, and it's a coverage summary. It lists out in very simple terms, in an exact, easy-to-understand format, what coverage you do and don't have. And it will also show you the amounts of those coverages. It'll show your dwelling. It'll show your contents, other structures. And if it has additional other things, it'll be shown as a checkbox, either yes or no. For instance, it will show if you have animal liability coverage or not, yes or no. It will also show, in some cases, depending on the type of coverage, whether that amount of coverage is in addition to your other limits or is within your other limits. In other words, if it limits your coverage or it adds to the coverage shown in your declarations page. So what I would encourage you to do the next time you get your policy in the mail is the first thing I want you to turn to is your summary of coverage, your summary of insurance. Again, listed in very plain English, and it's pretty easy to understand. 4 or 5 pages long, but a lot of that has to do with format and not because it's a lot of thick lawyer-ease type of language. If you can get through those first 2 and you're feeling a little ambitious, then what I would suggest to you is you flip toward the back of your policy. You will find an endorsement called Florida Changes. Florida Changes will be the name of that document. Big bold letters at the top of the page. And it might be 4 or 5 pages. It might be a little bit longer than you'd expect. But what this does, insurance companies tend to have one policy form, but they might do business in many different states. And this form typically is the one that will show special limitations because of Florida conditions, such as hurricanes, and it will also adjust the language of the policy to comport with Florida-specific law. So this tends to have things sometimes like water damage limitations or mold limitations, things that may not be very important in Tennessee, but things that are a big deal down here in coastal Florida. So if you can look through that, it will. You may not be able to fully resolve this part of your policy because the confusing part is sometimes it will refer back to another part of the policy. It'll refer to section 1A, paragraph 2, subsection C, and it replaces that language with something else. I'm not suggesting you should fully understand that. What I am suggesting is, if it troubles you or it's something that you find interesting, circle it, and again, that's something you can ask your agent about, and it's their job, and they have the training to explain that to you in simple terms that you can understand. If your agent cannot explain to you your policy terms in language you understand and are comfortable with, then you have the wrong agent. The final part of the policy I'd suggest you want to look at, we've been trained, matter of fact, when I first got my insurance license, my dad told me, if you want to understand what a policy covers, look at the exclusions, because what's more important about what a policy covers is what it doesn't cover. And that's where people, I think, found themselves in some trouble after Hurricane Michael. So if you can look at exclusions in the policy, that will tell you really where the rubber meets the road. The other part of the exclusions that I would suggest you look at is flip toward the end of the policy. The last probably 10 or 15 pages will be endorsements. These are the things that I said would be listed on your declarations page. And you don't need to read all of these endorsements. I'm not necessarily suggesting that. But at least read the titles of these endorsements. They're all going to have titles in big, bold. It'll be centered in the top of the form. And read those titles and see what they say. And if it's something in that title that troubles you, or you have a question about, or you think you need some more information, then what I would suggest is, again,